In your kits, I put in the back some handouts so you can read them easier. I wanted to just make a comment real quick about historical activity. The political polarization chart basically is telling us that when congressmen or women are voting, that today they're voting with their party across party lines in a very significant way. There's very few people that are saying, I'm going to vote with the other team. So you get real divided one side or the other. And historically, there's been different times where that's occurred, and that's just a chart illustrating the real house divided scenario we're in today. The graph on the bottom shows you the different years where the Democrats had more seats and the Republicans had more seats. And, you know, it really has been back and forth over history. On the right-hand side, on the bottom, this shows us the market returns. And what's interesting from a historical perspective when you look at the stock market is the stock market likes gridlock. The lowest scenarios are when you have all Republican or all Democrat. When you have some of each, you get slower legislation change rates. Doesn't happen as fast. So businesses have more time to strategically figure out how to use the rules to make more money. So the stock market is likely going to favor a split president-Congress situation. So I think that's something we have to look forward to. And the other chart that's up here that may not be in your handout that is just worth mentioning is historically the third year of a four-year presidential election cycle has significantly been more favorable than the other years in the last 40 or 50 years. Luthold Research did a study on that, and that gives us something to be encouraged by, because the theory is in the third year of the presidential election cycle, the current reigning presidential party is going to do everything they can to make you feel good about voting that president again in 18 months. So we'll see if that holds true. Last concluding thought, and this is probably the most compelling thing if you get from anything from tonight, is this right here. This chart shows us in history our history of tax rates. And what you need to understand is that the highest tax brackets from 1930 to 1940 and 50s were 80, 85, 90%. Now, obviously, that is a function of how much money that the government back in 1933, 1934 had to spend to start the economy going when we had the Great Depression. In many of our meetings we've had here, we've talked about what's the potential outcome. And I do think we have to be prepared for an expectation tax rates could go to 80 or 90% for the higher taxpayers. That seems crazy, but even Friedman, I listened to his presentation this summer, and he said he did the math. To make the budget work for the next 10 years, we would have to be at 73% tax rates to make the budget work as it stands today. So what you need to understand, though, higher tax rates, and of course they've come down in the 70s and 80s and 90s, look below at the returns of the market decade to decade on the chart below. What I find very interesting is the highest performing decade for stocks is the 50s. I can't quite make out the numbers, but it's around 19% average annual return. It was even greater than the decade of the 90s, and it did it in the face of the entire decade, 85% taxes for the highest tax brackets. So it is not, if taxes go up to very high levels, equals poor returns in its stock markets. That's not true. History shows us that's not true. It's logical, but it's just not true. So, you know, we're going to continue to look for places that there's value, look for opportunities to invest where we think we can capture returns without a whole lot of downside exposure. And, you know, we're going to have to see what happens in this tax thing, but I think that's really important. I don't think most people know that bit of information. So that's information that's in your kits. You know, our group at Adams, we really appreciate you guys. We really want to do things that keep you informed. I hope you got some things from tonight. I did put in a notes page where I organized all the things we talked about into subsets and made it easy for you to kind of refer to later, and that's in the back of your kit.